this is a very interesting story, isn't it, this whole business about the Ukraine, because I think the West, and I'm not too sure that the answer is what we're getting out of Canberra, calling people thugs and bullies and so on. But what has happened here now, if the West seeks to mobilize against Russia, and Russia, in my view, has more cards to play here than does the West. I can make that point in a minute, Stephen, but if that happens, that leaves China free to be able to navigate and negotiate what they want to do in this part of the world.
Absolutely.
I mean, the West can't be in two places at once. So for that reason, it leaves us very vulnerable. But what was significant here was, of course, at the Olympic Games, that the Russian president and the Chinese president came to a consensus where they talked about an unbreakable friendship at the Olympic Games. And so here's Moscow doing an agreement, reaching an agreement with China for an area outside China's sphere of influence. In other words, China has virtually said in that statement at the Olympic Games that they will support whatever Russia seeks to do in Ukraine. And in return, President Putin said to Xi Jinping, he said, we're on a unity ticket, and that Western interference in human rights and their political systems, we will block. So the reality is, of course, that the West, the notion that the West runs the world is now no longer a valid reason. They think the West is failing. And, of course, what is the common theme here? We saw it yesterday. There was the leader of the free world, President Biden, at a press conference, bumbling his way through. He couldn't even get the sentences out. He didn't take any questions at all. And at the end of the day, Xi Jinping and Putin are saying, we don't have to worry about this lot. The West has never, ever been weaker. So Russia here is now seeing that kind of weakness. The other point that I would make, though, here, in terms of sanctions, is a very significant point that I believe is being overlooked. I actually think, from my reading of it, that Washington doesn't have the killer weapon that Putin possesses, and that is Russia's capacity to produce all the materials and the parts that modern technology needs. There's a global market for these things called semiconductor chips, and they're critical to this electronic economy. And Russia is the prime provider and supplier in the world of titanium and palladium and all these metals which are used for these chips. Now, if Russia suddenly says, stop, and we're not going to provide the titanium because they and Ukraine, by the way, produce the bulk of the world's titanium, then things like Boeing, for example. Boeing uses this titanium in its 737, 767, 777s. Now, if they start saying to the West, listen, these materials that we have and this technology we have is not available to you, these rare earth metals, then the West is in an absolute mess. I mean, Britain's aerospace industry depends on Russian supplies. I mean, here we are relying on a hostile, state-controlled entity which helps us build fighter jets and rockets and missiles and submarines and helicopters and satellites and all the rest of it. And Russia has the whip hand here, can say, no more.